Elliot, I need space. Space? I repeated, my voice surprisingly calm. Yes, she said, her eyes filled with a kind of desperate confusion. I feel suffocated. I need time to figure things out, to figure out what I really want. Okay, I said, pushing my plate away. She looked at me, her brow furrowed. Okay? Okay, I repeated, a small smile playing on my lips. You need space, I understand? She seemed taken aback by my lack of resistance, my lack of pleading. Elliot, are you sure? Don't you want to talk about this? What's there to talk about? I said, standing up. You need space. I get it. I'll give you space. My life with Jenna was like a well-furnished waiting room. Comfortable, predictable, and utterly devoid of, well, life. We had the matching towels, the coordinated throw pillows, the Netflix queue synced to within an inch of its life. From the outside, it was the picture of domestic bliss. But on the inside, let's just say the air was getting a little stale. It wasn't that Jenna was a bad person. She wasn't. She was kind, funny, and undeniably beautiful. But somewhere between the IKEA trips and the Sunday brunches, I'd lost myself. Or maybe I'd never really found myself in the first place. See, I had this dream, this ridiculously vivid dream of living in Japan, working in the Tokyo branch of my company, navigating the neon-drenched streets, learning the language, immersing myself in the culture. It was more than just a fantasy. It was a yearning, a deep-seated need to break free from the ordinary and embrace something more. But Jenna, bless her heart, was a creature of comfort. The thought of leaving her familiar bubble, her friends, her family, her favorite coffee shop, it was enough to send her into a tailspin. So I stayed. For her. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You compromise, you sacrifice, you put their needs before your own. Except somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten what my own needs were. It all came to a head one rainy Tuesday evening. We were having dinner, the usual pasta and pesto routine, when Jenna put down her fork and said those fateful words. Elliot, I need space. The words hung in the air, heavy as the storm clouds gathering outside. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman I loved, but a stranger who was asking me to disappear. Space, I repeated, my voice surprisingly calm. Yes, she said, her eyes filled with a kind of desperate confusion. I feel suffocated. I need time to figure things out, to figure out what I really want. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger, wasn't sadness, wasn't even surprise. It was acceptance, a quiet, almost serene understanding that this was it. The end of the waiting room, the beginning of something else. Okay, I said, pushing my plate away. She looked at me, her brow furrowed. Okay? Okay, I repeated, a small smile playing on my lips. You need space, I understand. She seemed taken aback by my lack of resistance, my lack of pleading. Elliot, are you sure? Don't you want to talk about this? What's there to talk about? I said, standing up. You need space, I get it. I'll give you space. I walked out of the dining room, leaving her sitting there, alone with her half-eaten pasta and her newfound freedom. As I walked down the hallway, I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching myself from outside my own body. Elliot Carter, the accommodating boyfriend, the man who always put others first, was finally letting go. It was a bittersweet feeling, a mixture of regret and liberation. Regret for the years wasted, the dreams deferred, the life unlived, but also liberation, a sense of breaking free from the shackles of expectation, the suffocating weight of someone else's needs. I went into the bedroom, opened the closet, and started packing. Not just a suitcase, but boxes, bags, everything. I was leaving. Not just the apartment, not just Jenna, but the entire life I had built around her. The life that had slowly, insidiously, been suffocating me. As I packed, I thought about Japan. The neon lights, the bustling streets, the ancient temples, the unfamiliar language. It was a world away from the comfortable predictability of my life with Jenna. It was a world of possibility, a world where I could finally be me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of excitement, a flicker of hope. Jenna might have wanted space, but I was about to find a whole new world. The efficiency with which I dismantled our life together surprised even me. It was like I'd flipped a switch, and this new, decisive Elliot had emerged from the chrysalis of the old. No more Mr. Nice Guy, no more accommodating boyfriend. Just a man on a mission. The apartment, once a testament to our shared history, became a staging ground for my escape. Furniture was sold, belongings were boxed, and the walls, once adorned with framed photos of our smiling faces, were stripped bare. Each discarded item, each empty space, felt like a shedding of the past, a symbolic severing of the ties that had bound me. "You're really going through with this, then?" Jenna asked one evening, her voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and something else. Regret? Fear? It was hard to tell. "Yes," I said, taping up another box. "I am. But what about us?" "Us?" I repeated, a touch of bitterness creeping into my voice. "There is no us, Jenna. Not anymore." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "But I didn't mean it. I didn't want you to leave. I needed some time." "And you have it," I said, my voice firm. "You have all the time in the world." I avoided her gaze, focusing on the task at hand. I couldn't afford to get sucked back into her emotional vortex, her indecision, her need for control. I had to keep moving forward, keep my eyes on the prize, Tokyo. The phone call to my company was surprisingly easy. "Yes," I said to the HR representative. "I've reconsidered the Tokyo transfer. I'm accepting the position." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Excellent, Mr. Carter. We're thrilled to have you on board. When can you start?" "As soon as possible," I said, a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. The next few days were a blur of activity. Booking flights, securing a visa, finding a temporary apartment in Tokyo. Each step, each completed task brought me closer to my dream, closer to the life I was meant to live. My final interaction with Jenna was brief, almost clinical. I handed her a set of keys. "These are for the storage unit," I said. "I've left some of your things there." She took the keys, her fingers brushing against mine. A flicker of the old connection, a spark of the familiar longing. But it was quickly extinguished by the wall I had built around myself, a wall of determination and self-preservation. "Goodbye, Jenna," I said, turning to leave. "Elliot, wait." I paused but didn't turn around. "What? Will you come back?" I hesitated, then said, "I don't know." And with that, I walked away, leaving her standing there, alone in the empty apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life that was no more. I felt a pang of guilt, a fleeting sense of responsibility for the pain I was causing. But it was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of purpose, the knowledge that I was finally on the right path, the path that led to Tokyo, to a new life, to a new me. The movers arrived, their gruff efficiency a welcome distraction from the emotional turmoil swirling within me. "Everything goes to storage, right?" the foreman asked, his voice devoid of inflection. "Yes," I said, handing him the paperwork. "Everything." I watched as they loaded the truck, each piece of furniture, each box of belongings, a tangible reminder of the life I was leaving behind. But there was no sadness, no regret, just a quiet sense of closure, a recognition that this was necessary, inevitable. As the truck pulled away, I stood on the curb, a single suitcase at my feet, the world stretching out before me, vast and unknown. I took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. A smile spread across my face. Tokyo was calling, and I was ready to answer. Tokyo hit me like a pachinko parlor at rush hour, a cacophony of flashing lights, frenetic energy, and a whole lot of noise I didn't understand. Stepping out of Narita Airport was like stepping onto another planet. The air itself felt different, thick with humidity and the scent of something I couldn't quite place. A mix of exhaust fumes, exotic spices, and was that cherry blossom? In October? My carefully curated Japanese vocabulary, gleaned from late-night Duolingo sessions and the occasional anime binge, evaporated the moment I was confronted with a barrage of rapid-fire Japanese from the taxi dispatcher. I managed a stammering konnichiwa and a frantic wave of my phone with the pre-programmed address of my temporary apartment. The dispatcher, a woman with a permanent frown and the patience of a starving badger, simply snatched the phone, barked something into her headset, and shoved me towards a waiting cab. The ride into the city was a sensory overload in overdrive. Towering skyscrapers scraped the sky, their neon signs a kaleidoscope of colors that would make Times Square look like a quaint Christmas village. The streets teemed with people, salarymen in identical suits, teenagers in outlandish Harajuku fashion, elderly couples strolling hand in hand, and the sounds, the constant hum of traffic, the jingles of 1,000 vending machines, the rhythmic clack of train announcements. It was a symphony of urban chaos that both terrified and exhilarated me. My apartment, nestled in a quiet side street in the Shibuya district, was a welcome respite from the sensory onslaught. Tiny, yes, and with a bathroom that resembled a spaceship escape pod. But it was mine. My own little sanctuary in this bewildering metropolis. I spent the first few days in a state of bewildered exploration. Armed with a phrasebook, a pocket Wi-Fi router, and a healthy dose of naivety, I ventured out into the urban jungle. Each encounter with a locale was a linguistic tightrope walk, a delicate dance of gestures, mangled pronunciation, and the occasional desperate resort to Google Translate. Sumimasen, I'd stammer, pointing at a map with the bewildered expression of a lost puppy. Shibuya ekai. Doko desu ka? Excuse me, where's Shibuya Station? The responses varied. Some would smile kindly and point me in the right direction, their words a torrent of incomprehensible syllables. Others would simply stare at me with a mixture of amusement and pity, as if I were a particularly dim-witted tourist who'd wandered in from a time warp. And then there were those who, bless their souls, would take pity on my linguistic ineptitude and patiently guide me to my destination. Their broken English a welcome lifeline in a sea of unfamiliar sounds. But even the misunderstandings had a certain charm. Like the time I tried to order a beer in a tiny izakaya and ended up with a plate of pickled plums. Or the time I attempted to compliment a woman on her beautiful kimono and accidentally asked her if she was pregnant. Let's just say the ensuing awkward silence could have been cut with a katana. Yet, amidst the stumbles and fumbles, I was finding my footing. I discovered hidden ramen shops tucked away in narrow alleyways, their steaming bowls of noodles a revelation of culinary comfort. I mastered the art of navigating the intricate subway system, a feat that felt like cracking the Enigma code. And I even managed to hold a semi-coherent conversation with the old man who ran the neighborhood kendo dojo, a conversation that ended with me signing up for a beginner's class. Tokyo was a challenge, a constant test of my adaptability and resilience. But it was also an adventure, a thrilling immersion in a culture that was both ancient and modern, familiar and utterly alien. And as I navigated the neon-lit streets, the unfamiliar sounds and smells swirling around me, I felt a sense of awakening, a shedding of the old, comfortable skin, and the emergence of a new, more confident, more adventurous Elliot. An Elliot who was finally, truly living. The kendo dojo was a world away from the neon-drenched streets of Shibuya, a haven of polished wood floors, the sharp scent of bamboo, and the rhythmic thwack of shinai against armor. My sensei, a man named Tanaka-san with the physique of a wiry bonsai tree and eyes that could pierce steel, was a master of both the sword and the subtle art of intimidation. "Kiai!" he'd bellow, his voice echoing through the dojo as we practiced our strikes. "More spirit, more focus." I'd grunt in response, sweat dripping down my face, my legs burning from hours of lunges and footwork. Kendo, I quickly discovered, was more than just hitting things with a stick. It was a discipline, a meditation in motion, a way of channeling your inner warrior. And for a guy who spent most of his life hunched over a drafting table, it was a revelation. My Japanese lessons, held in a brightly lit classroom with a relentlessly cheerful teacher named Miss Sato, were a different kind of challenge. Conjugating verbs, memorizing kanji, deciphering the nuances of honorifics. It was enough to make my head spin. But with each fumbled sentence, each successful exchange with a shopkeeper or a fellow student, I felt a growing sense of accomplishment. The language, once an impenetrable barrier, was slowly becoming a bridge, connecting me to this new world I was inhabiting. And what a world it was. Beyond the tourist traps and the neon-lit facades, I discovered a Japan of quiet beauty and hidden depths. Ancient temples nestled in serene forests, their moss-covered stones whispering tales of centuries past. Bustling markets overflowing with exotic fruits, fragrant spices, and the rhythmic chants of vendors hawking their wares. Peaceful gardens where time seemed to slow down, the only sounds the gentle rustling of leaves and the chirping of cicadas. I embraced it all, the familiar and the unfamiliar, the comfortable and the challenging. I wandered through crowded festivals, marveling at the elaborate costumes and the infectious energy of the crowds. I hiked through bamboo forests, feeling dwarfed by the towering stalks and the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. I even braved a karaoke bar, belting out a surprisingly decent rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody to a room full of amused locals. With each new experience, each unexpected encounter, I felt myself changing, growing, evolving. The old Elliot, the one who lived for others, who put his dreams on hold, was fading away, replaced by a man who was confident, independent, and unafraid to embrace the unknown. "You've changed," Tanaka-san remarked one afternoon as we were packing up our gear after a particularly grueling practice session. "Changed?" I repeated, wiping the sweat from my brow. "Yes," he said, his eyes twinkling. "You move with more purpose now, more confidence." I smiled. "I guess I'm finally finding my footing." "Good," he said, nodding approvingly. "A warrior must always be sure of his stance." I left the dojo that day with a newfound sense of purpose, a feeling that I was not just a visitor in this country, but a participant, a contributor. I was no longer just observing Japanese culture. I was immersing myself in it, absorbing it, becoming a part of it. And as I walked down the street, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I realized that I wasn't just falling in love with Japan. I was falling in love with myself, the self I had rediscovered, the self I had always been meant to be. The gallery was a stark white cube, minimalist to the point of intimidation. Modern art, I'd learned, was often more about the concept than the execution. Still, I found myself drawn to a particular piece, a swirling canvas of bold colors that seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. "It's called Urban Flow," a voice said beside me. I turned to see a woman with eyes as vibrant as the painting itself. She had a mischievous smile and a messy bun that defied gravity. "It's captivating," I managed, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "Smooth, Elliot, real smooth." "Thank you," she said, her smile widening. "I'm Aiko, the artist." "Elliot," I replied, extending my hand, "and clearly an admirer." She laughed, a sound as bright and captivating as her art. "So, what brings you to my humble exhibition?" "I'm new in town," I explained, suddenly feeling self-conscious about my still limited Japanese. "Ah, a newcomer to Tokyo," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Welcome. What are your first impressions?" And just like that, we were off. We talked about art, about Tokyo, about the challenges and joys of navigating a new culture. She was curious about my life in America, about what had brought me to Japan. I found myself opening up to her, sharing my dreams, my frustrations, the sense of liberation I'd found in this unfamiliar city. "You know," she said after I'd recounted my kendo adventures and my near-disastrous encounter with the fermented soybeans, "you're not like most foreigners I've met." "Oh?" I said, intrigued. Most foreigners, she explained, they come to Japan and try to fit in, to become Japanese. But you embrace your otherness. You're not afraid to be different. Her words struck a chord within me. She was right. I wasn't trying to become Japanese. I was trying to become me. The me I'd suppressed for so long. The me who yearned for adventure, for challenge, for a life less ordinary. Aiko, I quickly discovered, was a kindred spirit. She was a free spirit, an artist who saw the world through a kaleidoscope of colors and emotions. She was passionate, independent, and utterly unafraid to be herself. And she saw in me something that no one else had ever seen, a potential waiting to be unlocked, a spirit yearning to be free. We started spending time together, exploring the hidden corners of Tokyo, sharing meals in tiny ramen shops, discussing art and life and everything in between. She became my guide, my translator, my window into a world that was both familiar and utterly foreign. "This," she said one afternoon, leading me down a narrow alleyway, "is a yokocho, a hidden alleyway filled with tiny bars and restaurants. Each one has its own unique character, its own story." We spent hours wandering through the yokocho, sampling yakitori skewers, sipping sake, listening to the laughter and chatter spilling out from the dimly lit doorways. Aiko, with her infectious enthusiasm and her encyclopedic knowledge of Tokyo's hidden gems, made the city come alive for me. "You know," I said one evening as we were watching the sunset over the Tokyo skyline, "I never thought I'd find this kind of connection, this kind of belonging, in a place so far from home." She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the twilight. "Sometimes," she said, "we have to travel far to find what's been inside us all along." Her words resonated deep within me. I had come to Tokyo seeking escape, seeking a new life, but I was finding something far more profound, a connection to myself, to my own spirit, to a woman who saw me, truly saw me, for who I was. And as I looked at Aiko, her silhouette outlined against the fiery sky, I knew that I was falling in love. Not just with her, but with the life we were creating together. A life filled with adventure, passion, and the quiet joy of shared moments. The sight of Jenna standing in the middle of Shibuya Crossing, looking as out of place as a polar bear in a bamboo forest, was enough to make me question my sanity. Had the sensory overload of Tokyo finally fried my circuits? Was this some kind of bizarre jet lag hallucination? "Jenna?" I said, my voice a mix of disbelief and dread. She turned, her face breaking into a hesitant smile. "Elliot, oh my God, it's really you!" She rushed towards me, throwing her arms around me in a hug that was both familiar and unwelcome. I stiffened, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over me. Surprise, anger, confusion, and a flicker of the old attachment, the echo of a love that had long since faded. What are you doing here?" I asked, gently extricating myself from her embrace. I came to see you," she said, her eyes searching mine. "I needed to see you." "See me," I repeated, a touch of bitterness creeping into my voice. "After all this time? After you told me you needed space?" She looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know I messed up. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I scoffed. "Leaving me, abandoning the life we built together, telling me you needed space? That wasn't a mistake, Jenna. That was a choice." She looked up, her eyes filled with a kind of desperate pleading. "But I didn't mean it, Elliot. I didn't want you to leave. I panicked. I didn't know what I wanted." "And now you do?" I asked, my voice laced with skepticism. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "I do. I want you. I want us." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who was lost, confused, and desperately trying to reclaim something she had thrown away. But the Jenna standing before me was not the Jenna I had known. The confident, independent woman who had navigated the streets of Tokyo with ease, who had conversed with locals in fluent Japanese, who had embraced the challenges and uncertainties of this new life. That was not the woman who had begged me to stay, who had clung to the familiar comforts of our old life. "Jenna," I said, my voice softening, "I'm not the same man you left behind. I've changed, grown, evolved." She nodded, her eyes tracing the lines of my face, the subtle changes that marked the passage of time and the transformation I had undergone. "I see that," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "And I like what I see." We spent the next few hours in a tense, awkward dance. She tried to rekindle the old intimacy, the shared jokes, the comfortable silences, but the spark was gone, replaced by a chasm of unspoken words and unhealed wounds. "So," she said, as we were walking along the banks of the Sumida River, "how's your Japanese coming along?" "Pretty good, actually," I replied, surprising myself with the ease with which I switched between languages. "I can hold a conversation, order food, even navigate the subway system without getting hopelessly lost." She smiled, but it was a strained smile, tinged with a hint of envy. "That's amazing, Elliot. You've really embraced this new life." "I have," I said, meeting her gaze, "and I'm happy, truly happy." Her smile faltered. She knew what I was saying, what I wasn't saying. The Elliot who had pined for her approval, who had put his dreams on hold for her happiness, was gone. In his place was a man who had found his own path, his own sense of purpose, his own definition of fulfillment. We reached a quiet bench overlooking the river, the city lights shimmering on the water. She sat down, her shoulders slumping with a weariness that went beyond jet lag. "Elliot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I miss you. I miss us." I looked at her, my heart aching with a mixture of pity and resentment. "I know," I said, "but it's too late, Jenna. We can't go back." She looked up, her eyes filled with a desperate hope that I knew I couldn't fulfill. "But maybe—" I reached out, gently touching her cheek. "No, Jenna, it's over. We're over." She closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. And in that moment, I knew that she finally understood. The Elliot she had known, the Elliot she had taken for granted, was gone. And the new Elliot, the Elliot who had found his own way, his own happiness, was no longer within her reach. The air crackled with unspoken tension as Jenna and I sat in a quiet cafe, the aroma of roasted coffee beans doing little to soothe the bitterness that lingered between us. She'd spent the past few days trying to recapture the ghost of our past, dragging me to our old haunts, reminiscing about shared memories that now felt like faded photographs in a dusty album. But the Elliot in those photographs was a stranger to me now. "This was our favorite spot, remember?" she said, gesturing to a picture with worn leather booths and the mismatched chairs. "We used to come here every Sunday for brunch." I nodded, a flicker of recognition stirring within me. We had spent countless hours in this cafe, discussing our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the future. But the dreams had changed, the fears had subsided, and the future we'd envisioned together had dissolved into the ether. "Jenna," I said, my voice firm but gentle, "we can't keep doing this. We can't keep pretending that nothing has changed." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and defiance. "But why not? Can't we just go back to how things were?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "We can't, because I'm not the same person I was back then, and neither are you." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. "Don't interrupt, just listen. You asked for space, Jenna, and in that space, I found myself. I found a life that I love, a city that inspires me, a woman who sees me for who I am, not who you wanted me to be." Her eyes widened, a flicker of understanding dawning in their depths. "Aiko," she whispered. "Yes," I said, nodding. "Aiko. She's everything you're not, Jenna. She's passionate, independent, and she embraces life with a fervor that you could never understand. That's not fair, she protested. I'm not. Her voice trailed off, the words failing her. She knew I was right. She had always been cautious, hesitant, afraid to step outside her comfort zone. She had clung to the familiar, the predictable, while I yearned for adventure, for challenge, for a life less ordinary. I'm sorry, Elliot, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I truly am. I didn't realize. I didn't appreciate. Her apologies, though sincere, were too little, too late. The damage had been done, the trust had been broken, and the Elliot who had yearned for her approval, who had molded himself to fit her expectations, was gone. Later that evening, I met Aiko at our favorite yokocho, a hidden alleyway filled with tiny bars and restaurants that pulsed with the energy of Tokyo's nightlife. She was waiting for me at a small table outside a yakitori stall, her face illuminated by the warm glow of paper lanterns. Everything okay? She asked, her eyes searching mine. I nodded, taking her hand in mine. Everything's perfect, I said, feeling a surge of gratitude for this woman, this city, this life that I had found. Jenna appeared at the entrance to the alleyway, her figure silhouetted against the neon lights of the main street. She hesitated for a moment, then walked towards us, her footsteps echoing on the cobblestones. Elliot, she said, her voice tentative. I stood up, Aiko rising beside me. Jenna, I said, my voice firm. What are you doing here? I just wanted to say goodbye, she said, her eyes flitting between Aiko and me. Goodbye, Jenna, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of sadness and resignation. I understand, she said, nodding slowly. You've moved on. You're happy. I am, I said, meeting her gaze. Happier than I've ever been. She turned to Aiko, a flicker of something akin to envy crossing her features. He's a good man, Aiko, she said. Take care of him. Aiko smiled, her eyes sparkling with a confidence that Jenna had never possessed. I will, she said, her voice firm. I promise. Jenna nodded, then turned and walked away, her figure disappearing into the crowd. I watched her go, a sense of closure washing over me. The past was finally behind me. The ties that had bound me to a life that was not my own had been severed. I turned to Aiko, my heart filled with a love that was both new and familiar, a love that had blossomed in the fertile ground of self-discovery and acceptance. You wanted space, Jenna, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet alleyway. I found a whole new world. And as I wrapped my arms around Aiko, the warmth of her embrace a testament to the life we were building together, I knew that I had finally come home. The morning sun, filtering through the paper screens of our traditional Japanese home, painted the tatami mats in a warm, golden glow. Aiko, her hair a mess of dark curls, stirred beside me, a sleepy smile gracing her lips. Ohio, she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. Ohio, I replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Life in Tokyo had become a comfortable rhythm, a blend of the familiar and the exotic. My Japanese was now fluent, my career thriving, my roots firmly planted in this vibrant city that had become my home. We'd moved from the cramped Shibuya apartment to a traditional house in a quiet neighborhood, a place where the scent of incense mingled with the aroma of Aiko's green tea and the laughter of our 2-year-old daughter, Hana. The years since Jenna's visit had been a whirlwind of experiences. Aiko and I had explored the countryside, climbed Mount Fuji, and even braved the chaos of a traditional Japanese wedding, complete with elaborate kimonos and enough sake to sink a small ship. We'd built a life together, a life that was richer, more fulfilling than anything I could have imagined back in my waiting room days. My work at the Tokyo branch had flourished. The initial challenges of navigating a new business culture had given way to a deep appreciation for the Japanese work ethic, the emphasis on collaboration and long-term vision. I'd even earned the respect of my colleagues. my initial gaijin status fading as my language skills and cultural understanding grew. But the most profound change was within me. The timid, accommodating Elliot, the man who had lived in the shadow of others' expectations, was a distant memory. In his place was a man who embraced challenges, who sought out new experiences, who was comfortable in his own skin, even when that skin was navigating the complexities of a foreign culture. Looking back, I could almost feel a sense of gratitude towards Jenna. Her need for space had been the catalyst, the push I needed to break free from the inertia of my old life and embrace the unknown. It had been a painful process, a shedding of old habits and ingrained beliefs. But the pain had been worth it, for it had led me to a life of authenticity, of purpose, of genuine connection. As I watched Aiko chasing Hana through the garden, their laughter echoing in the morning air, I realized that happiness wasn't something you found. It was something you created. It wasn't about external circumstances. It was about internal choices. It was about pursuing your dreams, embracing change, and defining success on your own terms. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its golden light on the city I now called home, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had found my place, my purpose, my happiness, and it was more beautiful, more fulfilling than anything I could have ever dreamed of.